Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'll give it a few seconds before we get started, just to enable anybody else who's a few seconds behind to join. So bear with us a few seconds as we do that. Okay, I think I'll make a start. First things first, good morning, everybody. My name's Adam Bryan. I am the Chief Executive of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. Really grateful for your time this morning. We thought we'd take the opportunity to update new councillors in particular, but anybody else who's interested really in the impact that the LEP's had over the course of the last number of years, and our plans moving forward as well. The session's obviously in the calendar for a good hour. I don't expect that we'll necessarily use the full hour. I'll probably take 25 minutes to go through the presentation. I would encourage you to post any questions on the Q&A function, which you'll see on Zoom, and folks in the background will bring those to my attention. I'll try and address as many of those questions as I can at the end. Also, as a panelist on this call is my Chief Operating Officer, Suzanne. Whilst I'll deliver the presentation, if we get to any questions towards the end that I might need Suzanne's support on, of course, drafting at that point. So I'll make a start now. And just to give you a bit of background to the South East LEP. So local enterprise partnerships were established back in 2010 and end of 2010, beginning of 2011. And we've really operated as the primary conduits for economic growth funding between government and local areas. In our case, I think it's probably fair to say that we work more closely with our local authority partners than most LEPs do. And I think that's really important. That's a really important thing to note as we run through this presentation. I think the size of our LEP, which is obviously indicated on this slide, means that closer working relationship with local authorities is just so important to make sure that we've got some resonance across local areas, whether that's through the public sector or, of course, the businesses that constitute the area and 2/3 of the board as well. The area obviously extends according to the map in front of you, so that's Essex, Southend and Thurrock, Kent and Medway and East Sussex. That's been the case since the tail end of 2010, and really that really comes together to form the largest LEP there is. I think that we always describe ourselves as being the largest LEP area outside of London, but actually the way that London organises themselves is a little bit different. So we can quite rightly say we're the largest LEP area, both in terms of population, sort of regular population, resident population, but also business population, and of course what goes hand in hand with that, economic output as well. So we've quite recently updated our strategy. So of course, with COVID and everything that's happened over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, we've had to have a fresh look at how we focus our activities. I'll talk about this at points through the course of the next 20 or so minutes, but the four areas that we'll focus on really corral around business resilience and growth, really our position as the UK's global gateway, communities for the future, because I think the combined ambition for housing and in particular for garden communities is more prevalent and stronger, and there's a greater ambition across Kent, Essex and East Sussex than you'll see in most parts of the country. So that is of course something that an organisation like this should seek to support. And also coastal catalyst, that really refers to the importance of our coastal areas, which face obviously significant challenges, socio-economic challenges in parts. And what comes hand in hand with that is us really being quite clear with government that narrative around levelling up really shouldn't just mean that more investment and support is targeted towards the Midlands and the North. That of course there are areas in our part of the country that require that ongoing support as well, and that's really part of that whole picture. So what does CELEP do? there are a number of things that we've managed to do over the course of the last number of years. I suppose the strongest, I won't read this slide verbatim, but of course the strongest message on here is really that convening power. So the blue line there around bringing together businesses, councils, universities, and other industry players in a genuine partnership for growth. We wouldn't have delivered anything if we didn't bring those groups together in a meaningful and respectful way. The structure that I'll mention in a second, it really does support bringing private sector and public sector together, and the education sector together in an even way that means everybody's voice is able to be clearly heard. And I think it's that partnership ethos that's been so important to us, and making sure that we've been able to deliver anything of significance over the course of the last decade. And really the structure here is what's really quite important to communicate, and I'll dwell on this for a minute or two because I think it really does speak to the uniqueness of this LEP and how we've managed to make things work. So when it comes to the allocation of funding, or whatever that is, a stimuli from government in respect of a new opportunity that LEPs should seek to capitalize upon, our starting point is really to take a degree of direction from the local areas. So we've got 4 federated boards that constitute CELEP, and when it comes to identifying the priorities in each of those areas, those federated boards have got that job to do. So it's not as if that the LEP board would just create a list from nowhere of projects to support or of initiatives to promote. Certainly those priorities need to come together at that federated level first. As you can see there, we've got 4 federated boards: Success Essex, Opportunity South Essex, Kent Medway Economic Partnership, and Team East Sussex. Those 4 groups cover the entirety of the geography and work together very strongly. And of course, the messages from those 4 federated boards aggregate at the CELEP level, and the CELEP board is able to identify its overall list of priorities, if you like, whatever the situation is, according to the inputs of those local areas. So it really means that both from a structural perspective, it works, it comes together, but obviously also in terms of how the work of the LEP resonates locally with either local politicians or local businesses. Those federated boards give us the opportunity to have a much deeper connection with those local areas, and we understand the area that much better on the basis of the success of that model. So really important is the sort of distinction between the strategic board and the accountability board. So the CELEP strategic board is the CELEP board, and that is the board of directors of CELEP Limited. So CELEP is established as a company limited by guarantee, and that strategic board is 2/3 business and 1/3 public sector. That is the group effectively that will achieve that priority list on the basis of what's been provided to it by those local federated boards. Now, when it comes to the approval of those lists and actually the examination of the business cases and the transfer of funding, we have what's called the accountability board to rubber stamp that, really. So when all those projects have gone through that process, the accountability board, set up as a local government joint committee, is sort of legally quite separate to the strategic board, and it is empowered to make those decisions to transfer that funding to the projects that have first of all been prioritised by the strategic board, gone through a business case process, and then hopefully come out the other end and been approved for funding. That's the way the structure works, and I think over the course of the last number of years it's been very successful, and very that division of labour, if you like, has been very effective, and it's meant that the way that we work has been very robust, and I think that model and the way that we report it through the website, the way that we've had public facing meetings, etc., has meant that we are probably the most transparent LEP in terms of those decisions, and anybody interested can certainly look back at our website and go through all of that material to establish exactly when and where and how and why those decisions have been made. The strategic board, and I won't list the names on this particular slide, other than to say that it's very ably chaired by Christian Brodie, who's been our chair now for around about 5 years, and whose term comes to an end in March 22. Chris is supported by Sarah Dance, who's our deputy chair, and then we have a board of 20 people, and a mix of business and local authority, with 5 co-opted reps as well. So it's a board overall of 25. That board underwent a number of changes a couple of years ago. Government came to us with a list of new requirements for how LEPs work, and of course we were able to respond very quickly and positively to that, and we've got a board now that works very well. But as I said before, the most important thing of all is that it is constituted of those local parts. So we've got representatives from each of those federated areas in respect of the business reps, and also the county and unitary council members, the directors of the board, are representative of the 6 upper tier authorities that cover our area as well. So it covers most bases. And obviously, in terms of the co-opted directors, we have education representatives as well, and Penny, who's a representative of the third sector. So just a little bit more on our recovery and renewal strategy. So I said before that we've split it 4 ways, really: a focus on business resilience and growth, UK's global gateway, communities for the future, and coastal catalyst. I won't rehearse what's in the slides, because of course we'll share the slides afterwards. But I will say at this point that we are at the moment, whilst we've been on a fairly solid trajectory for a number of years, in terms of our focus and how we can support this strategy beyond March 22. We are somewhat beholden to government's future direction on LEPs, because our role will change slightly. And we just need to make sure that actually how that the parameters that we're set to work within kind of match neatly across the strategic priorities that we've identified. We don't yet know for sure what government will request that LEPs focus on. We certainly do know, though, that there are elements of our economy that we would want to put particular attention to, which is why, however we have to organise ourselves, these 4 strategic priorities, as I rehearsed a little while ago as well, will remain important. And I think that's important to sort of have in mind. Despite the fact we will undergo somewhat of a change, I think it's important to recognise that these 4 themes aren't plucked out of thin air. Of course, they're developed in partnership with everybody in the area, but particularly the federated areas as well. This just gives you a bit more detail on how that sort of bleeds down into the work of the team. So those strategic priorities obviously are underpinned by 7 key objectives. So a lot of those 7 elements that you see across the bottom of the screen there really sort of give you a bit more clue as to sort of some of the activities that sort of go on in the team, and actually where we need to focus our energies moving forward. One thing that's important to be clear on is that it's not just the select board that we would engage with in terms of getting our steer from local businesses and from local authorities. What's been very successful, I think, over the course of the last 10 years, I guess, of the LEP has been the working groups that have been in place to take forward elements of our work. There are 10 of them. I'll sort of mention them now. So we have a clean. All of these working groups, I should add, are constituted of a mixture of different people, whether they are local authorities, whether they're businesses, whether they're HE or FE representatives, or representatives of social enterprise. These areas of focus have been important to the LEP. So we of course have a conversation on clean growth that has translated into a number of projects that have been able to support through one of our funding streams, which I'll get onto. We have a very fulsome conversation on coastal communities, really, a number of interest groups coming together to really articulate what the challenges are across CELEP's coastal areas and how we can rise to those challenges. One of the best pieces of work that we've been involved in over the course of the last couple of years was a coastal prospectus that sat alongside our most recent strategy, which really speaks to the challenge and the opportunity in the coastal area across the LEP, and we've used that quite strongly over recent times, and we'll continue to do so. I would certainly recommend looking at it on the website. We've been fortunate in our LEP area to have a number of enterprise zones. So there are 4. When enterprise zones became established and were designated rather back in 2011, 2012, very quickly, one was established in Harlow and at Discovery Park at Sandwich as well. But since then, there's been the work to establish the North Kent Enterprise Zone as well. And since we sorted out the slight overlap, the legacy overlap that we had with Coast Capital LEP, we're really pleased that now that Newhaven Enterprise Zone is also part of this LEP. And actually, we've done a fair bit to support activities there as well. So how enterprise zones operate moving forward and how where they sit in terms of government thinking and government policy, we're not yet clear on, but we certainly know that they've had a great effect locally. And as a policy driver and as a tool for engaging in economic growth in a particular area, we think they've been very effective. And we continue to work with colleagues across the rest of the country to make the case for more of that kind of intervention. And of course, a lot of the lessons, a lot of the positive things that have been taken from enterprise zones have been applied in the more recent Freeport policy that you will have seen covered and coming from government. The housing working group is the next one. So as I said before, we've got a number of a large ambition across the area and a number of partners engaged in that conversation. There are housing and development groups in each of the counties, which come together to form the overall housing and development group. So that really constitutes, both local authorities, but also housing developers and others who really have a fantastically lively, positive, ambitious, encouraging conversation about ambitions with housing. And one of the moments in my LEP career, I suppose, that's taken me back the most was sort of a good 4 years ago now. I went to an East Sussex Housing and Development Group meeting to talk about what the LEP was doing outside of the housing agenda. Turned up to it, and there must have been between 35 and 40 people in the room. That was the extent of the interest in the conversation, and that's replicated, and it's been replicated on an ongoing basis, through the years as well. The last one on this slide is the major projects group. So for us, one of the real benefits of having a LEP at this scale is the unique opportunity nationally, I would suggest, to bring together a number of major projects in the conversation around skills requirements, around supply chain, and just to sort of identify, where can we work together, or where can those major projects work together to have the best impact locally, to connect with the skills requirements and the people looking for work across the area, and to really sort of make sure that there's some good elements of supply chain mapping undertaken, and that there's a good understanding of the impact on different sectors, such as the construction sector. So the group that we have established at the moment, for example, includes representatives of Highways England for Lower Thames Crossing, from the garden communities in the patch, from Public Health England, moving to Harlow, from Bradwell B as well, from London Resort. So it goes across, the major sort of projects that are going to land in our area over the coming few years, and I don't think that there are many parts of the country that can boast such a vast array of massive projects just about to happen. And so it's therefore important that we bring that conversation together and just really do what we can to get the most out of those projects for people in the local area. Three other ones. So we have a rural group. Obviously, Salep's rural economy is huge, vitally important, and of course has faced untold challenge over the course of the last 18 months. That's been a particularly helpful conversation to be a part of, and again, it's spawned a number of projects that we've been able to support over the years as well. CCEN, which is the Southeast Creative Economy Network, is perhaps the group that's had the biggest impact of all. One thing that is particularly pleasing about CCEN is the fact that it sort of started as a working group of CELEP and still is a working group of CELEP, but it's absolutely grown organically. And people involved in that conversation, whether they are artists, whether they are venues, whether they're representatives of, they've got a digital interest, they're a digital business, they're representatives of the public sector, or whatever, they come together again in their droves on frequent occasions, and have done over the years to really push that agenda forward. And that has had a massive impact on what we've done as a LEP, and where we focused our funding, where we've focused our strategic thinking, and where we've translated that into influence over government. So that's kind of really supported things such as the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. There have been a number of projects that we've had direct funding into that CCEN's been able to promote. And it's just had a major impact, and more of that kind of work is whatever shakes down in terms of our particular priorities moving forward, that will be important. So the next one on the list is skills. I would say now that I think the work that this LEP has done on skills is probably the best of any LEP in the country. And I sort of say that in all seriousness. I think that what we've done has been fantastic on this agenda. So we have a skills advisory panel, we have a digital skills partnership, both of which serve to bring big businesses into the equation, to advise on how to support the skills agenda overall, how to enable people into work, how to promote digital opportunities. There are a vast range of projects that have been supported by the Digital Skills Partnership and by the Skills Advisory Panel. And beyond that, if the LEP network or in fact government talking to LEPs about skills come to anybody, they come to us first, they ask us first, partly because of the impact that this body of work has had, but of course partly because of the fact that we're representative of such a large area where the skills requirements are really quite acute in certain places. So that really has been a great success for this LEP, and for all the initiatives that will be there in the future. I'd expect that this LEP will have a good hand in them as well. One of the things that we did early days was allocate a good 22 million pounds worth of our capital fund specifically to skills to help colleges and around capital build and around equipment purchasing. That was run by us as a competitive process, and it just meant that the projects that we're able to support by and large were had a major impact on learners across the breadth of the LEP. We've got a really good and active social enterprise group and a strategy to go with it. And Penny on the board is a really good conduit between the board and the social enterprise group, and that really has been an excellent group to be involved in. And finally, we've got the U9 group, and of course, large LEP means big number of universities. We have 9 universities across the south represented in the Southeast LEP area. Bringing those guys together and having that conversation around giving it a better platform for universities in our world is of course really important. That translating into projects and impact is even more important. And of course there are a range of projects that we've been able to support through the funding streams that we've had at our disposal that absolutely do support the higher education sector overall. So that's been a really good conversation, one that's had good effects over the years. The Growth Hub is the part of the LEP's work that really is the front face to business. So when it comes to a lot of the conversations that we have, inevitably, they've been about projects to support, and aren't necessarily conversations that you would take out to businesses out there. They'll be between members of the board, the private sector members of the board, and public sector members of the board. They'd come together and really sort of, that wouldn't mean necessarily that we would have a face to business, but actually the Growth Hub is the thing that gives us that relevance to the SMEs in the area. So Growth Hubs sit within LEPs nationally, but as the slide here suggests, they provide a mechanism for integrating national and local business support, provide a sort of one-stop shop for local businesses to access the support they need for growth. We've got an overall brand, which is the Southeast Business Hub, but importantly, as you'd expect, reflecting the federated model that I've already talked about, that Growth Hub is delivered in 3 different ways across the patch. So the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, Best, which is Business, Essex, Southend and Thurrock, and Business East Sussex. They all, as the next slide suggests, all 3 of those groups come together at a CELEP level. But importantly, there are local steering groups there as well. So, they will all deliver to local businesses in a slightly different way. There'll be slightly different initiatives, opportunities, funding packages that the Growth Hubs in the different patches will deliver. But ultimately, the reporting back to government, because the funding comes through the LEP, goes back through the LEP, and any particular strong steer that we have from government, whether that's that there's extra funding on the table to help businesses respond to COVID, as there was last year, and there's quite a lot of it. Obviously, that would all funnel through from the LEP first and foremost, and then really be delivered at that local level. So, reflecting the federated model, it works strongly, and I think, moving forward, we want to make sure that we've got as strong a possible strategic steer over the Growth Hub as we possibly can at the LEP level, but that is absolutely not to take away from the fact that there needs to be local delivery, and of course, slightly different sort of opportunities on the table across the 3 different arms of the Growth Hub as well. I've already mentioned the digital skills partnership, but just to say again that well worth a look. Following Alison Parmar's departure from the FSB, we've slightly changed the leadership of the group, but the impact that the digital skills partnership has had has been tremendous. We're one of only 5 LEPs nationally that has been given the opportunity to pilot a digital skills partnership by DCMS. Initially, that was for a period of a couple of years, but it's been extended out. It's a great testament to the work of my colleague Jim Wilkinson, that it's been so positively received, and the things that we've been able to do to try and tackle the issues of digital exclusion have been really warmly received as well. And I would absolutely recommend a look at the digital skills partnership if you get the opportunity. So as we would not normally report, the size of the economy across the CELEP area is significant. So, we've got 4.28 million people, which is a 6.4% share of the UK population. And it will always be our challenge to make sure we get at the very least 6.4% of any funding that's available from government. GVA was 99 billion in 2019. It was a strong and belligerent economy in many respects. The number of ports in the area, the airports in the area, and of course, a lot of that is translated, certainly from a port perspective, that's translated into us having 2 free ports in our patch as well, which I'll talk about towards the end, which is a real positive. But all of these statistics will tell you that this is an area of real economic significance, which makes our job all the more important to make sure that the importance of this economy is really communicated centrally, and that of course the challenges that you'll see indicated here are communicated effectively as well. So the impact of COVID on jobs and people has been pretty significant. So you can see here that the estimated loss of £10 billion worth of GVA is, really huge. Claimant count has doubled in the patch over the course of the last year as well. And I'll give you a second to just look at some of those statistics, because I think, if anything is going to change the focus of organisations like this moving forward, it's absolutely statistics like this. There are challenges, there are opportunities, and I think it's important that we absolutely take that into account. We have done with the recovery and renewal strategy, but of course, when it comes to those, those future activities from government that we will look to support according to that new direction from April 1st next year, I would absolutely expect that responding to some of the challenges on a sectoral basis that COVID-19 has brought around will be top of the list to deal with. Move it on, please, Amy. Impact of businesses. So the Growth Hub was 6 times busier in January 21 than it was in January 2020, which gives you every sort of clue as to how important that is as a tool. The local authority payments to SMEs totaled 1.4 billion in the area between up to 30th of May 2021. And the rest of the stats there, again, I won't read them sort of bit by bit, but certainly they really paint a picture of an economy that's been really affected by what's happened over the course of the last 18 months, and it's uppermost in our minds. If you can move it on, please, Amy. So the key sectors for the LEP area have been pretty consistent over the last number of years. Construction, education, health and care, and of course that as a key sector just grows in importance. Low carbon and environmental, and indeed that's an area that we are supporting more than we have in the past with I guess the tools that we have in our armory and the things that we're able to support. Manufacturing sector, well, has always been a critical part of this area, particularly in South Essex. Life sciences, creative and digital, as I've already mentioned, I think we fully recognise that, and there is, I think creative as a sector is a good example of, I would say, the impact and the importance of that sector goes beyond the numbers. That there are people that will take the view that you really need to focus your efforts on those sectors that have got the biggest opportunity in terms of economic output, or the biggest challenge in terms of number of jobs affected. But actually, sometimes you really need to look at those sectors that really characterise the area, and that you would want to characterise the area. And I think the creative sector is a good example of one that whose importance goes beyond just the kind of the basic sort of economic indicators. It really is about what is it about this area that makes it special? What is it about Kent, Essex, East Sussex that really we need to support? One of the key challenges that we're going to have, moving forward is people don't need to live near London necessarily to work in London, is making sure that we can attract people to be here and want to live here. And achieving that USP is going to be really important. And there are certain things that we can do and certain activities that we can promote that will really contribute massively to that. And I would suggest that supporting the creative sector is important in that respect. Food production, huge in the area, massively affected by Brexit and by COVID, and I think that has emerged certainly over the course of the last year as a sector that we've supported more than most others. And transport and logistics as well. I mean, it goes without saying, with all the everything that I've already said about the geographic position of this part of the country, the ports, both ports and infrastructure improvements that are upstream, things like the Lower Thames crossing, the impact that's going to have, how we need to respond to that. Logistics sector, is massively important, and actually we need to think about, when those big changes do happen to this economy for the positive or the negative over the coming years, what impact does that have on the shape of that sector? What impact will the low Thames crossing, for example, have on, travel to work and travel to learn areas? Potentially that could be really exciting. So you'll have a logistics sector that's sort of based around the Thames estuary, that all of a sudden, companies based on one side of the river will probably more readily employ people from the other side as well, and all of a sudden, there's a shift, and a positive shift, in terms of the future of that particular sector. So there are lots of opportunities. I think those 9 sectors are the ones that really kind of characterize the area. And of course, what we do is keep that under review. Look at what's happening. I think the data and intelligence side of what the LEP does is probably stronger now than it's ever been. So we certainly can continue to look at what the stat. We're back on. The joys of working on Zoom. Apologies everybody for the interlude. And having just realised the time, I think I promised that I'd only talk for 25 minutes, as ever. I'm talking for slightly longer, so I'll attempt to be a little bit quicker through the rest of it. This slide here gives you a bit of an indication as to the body of work, and the sort of, from a strategic perspective, the things that we've been focused on to date. So just going from left to right, I've already mentioned the digital skills partnership. We've got a really strong skills strategy, and actually what we've recently been able to do is repurpose some of our Growing Places Fund money and create 2 COVID-19 support funds. One of them is focused on skills. One of them, in the grey column, is focused on business support. So that's been a very positive response by the LEP to some of the challenges brought about by COVID. And still on skills, we still administer European Social Fund and get very much involved in those conversations. We've got a very successful tutor bursary programme, and I've already mentioned the skills advisory panel. On strategy, I won't retell the story that I've already told, just to say that actually the bottom box there mentions Energy South to East, which is an energy strategy that we developed quite recently with our neighbouring LEPs in Enterprise M3, so across the M3 area, and Coastal Capital, which is I guess the area of the country from Croydon down to Brighton, so our neighbours in that direction. And that's really influential in making sure that we can respond positively to that whole agenda, and I would suggest will be even more important as the LEP moves forward with a slightly different focus. And business support, of course, we've got the Growth Hub that I've already mentioned. We've got the Business Support Fund, which is live at the moment, which is worth a look. And of course, also you wouldn't expect us to undertake this activity without working with others. And we were brought together about a year and a half ago into a cluster with both London and the Hertfordshire LEP to really work together as a group of growth hubs, and that really has been around a lot of the Brexit support and COVID response work, and that's been a very edifying process to be in, actually, and I think it's proved the value of our model. The funding regime that we've been able to look over has been important. So the last thing I'll cover in this presentation is that, so I won't do it now, but suffice it to say that every opportunity that we've had to divert money towards projects in the area we've taken. So I know there are some LEPs out there that have got teams of 30, 40, 50 people. We've still got fewer than 20 people in the team, and that's as big as we've ever been. And partly that's because we've always taken the decision to just divert money into supporting the local economy wherever we could, where other LEPs will have taken a view to organise themselves differently and sort of resource better. We've been different to that, and I think we're proud of that. We've maintained a sort of a really efficient team over the course of those last number of years. If you can move me on, please, Amy, if you're still there. Excellent. And on to the next one. Oh. So this is how the funding is broken down. So the Local Growth Fund has been the main capital grant for investment, including the Skills Capital Fund, as I've already mentioned. And that's really been about delivery of jobs and homes. That's been the focus of the Local Growth Fund. We've had best part of £600 million, obviously. You can see it on the slide. We've supported over 100 projects, and that's really been the sort of bread and butter of what the LEP's done over the course of the last number of years. We still have got projects that are not quite there in terms of delivery. But one of the things that accountability board structure that I've already mentioned enables us to do is keep a really keen eye on those projects and projects that are slipping or projects that won't start. Because if we have had a situation where projects actually can't start for whatever reason, we've been able to move and sort of change the program and bring other projects forward, as advised by that pipeline of projects that emanates from those federated areas. So that's all worked very strongly, and that's been whilst the Local Growth Fund has come to its end in March this year. Obviously, we've still got legacy projects. We've still got a range of projects that, as I say, are yet to deliver, and we've still got responsibilities around monitoring as well. In addition to that, since 2011, we've had the Growing Places Fund. That's amounted to about £50 million, covered 27 projects so far. So that's a capital loan. So that's awarded at 0% interest rate. That money comes back to us. Similar aims to Local Growth Fund, but we've been able to recycle it into different projects over the years. And as I just mentioned, we've been able to repurpose some of that funding to really have a much closer support link in terms of COVID recovery. Last year, we were awarded £85 million worth of the Getting Building Fund. And I would add that this was a £900 million national part, of which we got almost a tenth. Some LEPs got £4 million. We got £85 million. And that was about really targeting support of projects that could, get on the ground quickly, that were shovel ready to build, and ready to sort of combat the economic downturn brought about by COVID. That was one of those situations where we needed to respond to government within a number of weeks. I think we literally had just under 2 weeks, and we were able to put that structure in place that I've mentioned to you already, and support a vast range of projects, many more projects than other LEPs have been able to support, and those are all underway and being monitored and supported in the same way that the Local Growth Fund projects are, through that accountability board structure. The Sector Support Fund is a fund that we created, actually. So took the view a number of years ago that the revenue element of Growing Places Fund, which again I'll say other LEPs have used to grow their own teams, we should use to support projects, revenue-based projects, emanating from those working groups that I've mentioned before, that are there to support certain issues and certain initiatives across different sectors of our economy. I've been really proud of this because we wanted to do this. It was a good idea, and there've been 21 projects supported, that some of which will be highlighted in a second. And it's the more of that kind of thing we can do, the better. And if we have more revenue funding at our disposal over the course of the coming few years, then we've certainly got the structures in place to be able to get those agreements to put it to good use, and that's been a great success of what we've done. So Local Growth Fund, as I say, £579 million, 108 projects, and that's been massively impactful across the area. Amy, if you can skip on to the next one. You'll see from this, I won't read the the detail of the slides, because we definitely will share them. But there are a vast range of things that have been supported fairly recently. Mercury Rising, which is the really our contribution to the Mercury Theatre in Colchester, and bringing that up to speed, bringing it into a leading regional theatre. That's been, I was there a couple of weeks ago to really look at what's happened there, and it's been fantastic, and that's just about to go through its full sort of proper opening over the course of the coming few weeks, and it's been great for us to contribute to that one. Kent Medway Medical School, absolutely huge. This is totally something that you would expect that we should support. £9 million worth of CELEP funding has gone into that, and given everything that's happened over the course of the last year to 18 months, of course that is a sector and an interest that you would expect us to want to support. If you can move it on, please, Amy. The Growing Places Fund, again, that's the best part of 50 million that's been available to us, operated as a loan scheme, and again been able to support a range of projects. Move it on, please, Amy. One that's fairly recently been agreed is green hydrogen generation, which is a Herne Bay based project. A good almost £3.5 million worth of GPF loan gone into that one. Really exciting. So we'll be watching that one with great interest. Again, it's a project which absolutely speaks to the agenda that organisations like this should be supporting, and one to look out for over the course of the coming months. Thanks, Amy. So Getting Building Fund, as I said, was the one that really was thrust upon us roughly a year ago, I would say. We had, as I said, not too long to respond to the initial message from government. But as with the Local Growth Fund, there are a number of jobs and a number of homes that are promised, but through each of the projects, and obviously that aggregates. So in terms of the Getting Building Fund, we're talking about safeguarding, best part of 3,500 jobs, helping deliver in time, best part of 10,000 new jobs, and unlocking space for just over 7,000 homes. So overall impact of the programme, massively significant. If you can move it on, please, Amy. And just to give you an indication of some of those projects, St George's Creative Hub in Kent, being one of them, in Gravesend, restoring the glory of the Winter Garden as part of the Devonshire Park quarter in Eastbourne. We've previously supported the Welcome Building through Local Growth Fund in Eastbourne, and anybody who's been there could totally recognise the positive impact that those interventions have had on that part of the town, and you can sort of see what that's been able to inspire since some of those earlier interventions have completed. Tyndall Square in Chelmsford will completely transform the top of the high street there, and that's really going to open up space for a sort of public event, but also supports a lot of the businesses at that part of Chelmsford. There hasn't been, to say it's the biggest the county town, there hasn't been a sort of part of the city that's actually been able to accommodate that civic kind of activity. So that, we hope, our contribution to that certainly will have a major impact on how that place feels. Next slide, please, Amy. And on to the next one. So the Sector Support Fund is the project that I mentioned, which was, I guess, our design to support projects that otherwise would struggle to find the funding, and projects that we wouldn't necessarily been able to support before. A really nice example here is Buy Local Southeast. So lots of activity already going on, particularly by colleagues in Kent, in producing Kent, in sort of encouraging people to buy local, but actually by using the CELEP funding to lift that to a CELEP scale. I think the impact that project is going to have is going to be truly significant. The website is well worth a look. and be interested to sort of see how that translates into outputs. But again, it's one of those projects that I think hopefully has had a good impact, and one of those that it's been really nice to be able to support. Areas of focus, I think, are going to change slightly as we are given an indication from government as to the direction for LEPs. So obviously, with the COVID-19 response funds that I've already mentioned are going really well. If we need to do more of that, I would suggest that this is an organisation that should. The net zero agenda is going to be important for us moving forward, as are things like diversity and inclusion, for sure, because we need to practice what we preach, and we need to make sure that we are as representative as the communities as we can possibly be, both across the select board and all the other groups that we engage with. So that will be a real focus for us moving forward. There are other things such as where we take the major projects group that I've already mentioned to the next level, how we continue to support the establishment of the 2 free ports in the area. We've been a part of those conversations to help work up those projects and get them to the point of designation. But obviously, given the abilities that this LEP has got, and the people that are engaged at the board level, our ongoing input into the free ports is going to be really important. And of course, another part of it here, again, not on the slide, is really where we take the growth hub moving forward as well. As I've already said, that will continue to be, and business support will continue to be, a really important thing for LEPs to do. Government are going to have new expectations about how we do that. So what we need to do is sort of extol the virtues of the model that we have in place, and make sure that we can continue to deliver that as we move forward, and strengthen it wherever we can. The last thing I was going to mention on this slide was Catalyst South, and that's really interesting. So that is us collaborating with our neighbour LEPs, if you like, across that circle London. So we've all got obviously different agendas, we've all got different economies that we represent, but there certainly are areas where we come together. We've got common interest. Part of that is that important narrative around making sure that government recognise that investment in this part of the country is every bit as important, if not more important, than investing elsewhere. Part of it is really sort of looking at some of the specific challenges that we have, and sort of helping respond to them, looking at the opportunities. Really good example, just last week we ran an airport towns event with a number of the airports across the patch. So this goes, given the geography of this, this was Heathrow, Gatwick, Southampton, Southend, Stansted, and extended up to Luton for this event as well, really to talk about the impact of the downturn of the aviation sector on those communities adjacent to the airports. So what can we do as organisations like this to really respond to that for place? We've got a good understanding of those challenges. How can we support everybody in that mix? How can we make sure that the people in those economies aren't are able to respond positively, have got opportunities into the future, and we can support best activities to make sure that the heart's not ripped out of certain places. Certainly the worst effects of the downturn of that particular sector were felt outside of the CELEP area, but we had an interesting perspective into it, looking at the data and bringing an angle from our airports as well. So that'll be an interesting one moving forward for sure. If I just move on to the final slide. I appreciate I've kept it within the hour, but I just want to address any questions that pop up in a second. I do appreciate you listening to me if you're still there. Our contact details are all on this slide. By all means, drop us a line. We've got obviously got the email address there, but also you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. Not quite yet established the CELEP TikTok page, but you never know, I might get there. So that was what I wanted to cover in terms of the presentation, and I'm grateful for everybody for being with me on this. I'm just looking at the questions that have come in, just to see if I can address any of these. So there's a question here around measuring the net effect on jobs, GVA, and other factors of our activities. The simple answer to that is absolutely yes, we'll measure this. So I've already mentioned our reading of the economy is better than it's been before. So, we've got a really strong data and intelligence function now, and I think that will continue to be important, but even more important moving forward. If we're going to say that X, Y, and Z are particular issues for our LEP, then we need to back it up with data, and we'll do that. In terms of the effect of our investments, one of the things that we need to focus on now is really that monitoring and evaluation. So let's have a look at money that we've invested and how that's translated into outcomes so far. And really go around all those projects and actually just prove back to government, prove back to the taxpayer that these projects, A, have been the right ones to support, and B, are having a real impact, across the whole area. So that is absolutely something that we'll focus on. There aren't any other questions in the Q&A at the moment, and I'm conscious that I've talked at you for best part of 57 minutes, so hopefully that might be some indication that I've answered many questions that you might have.
I think we have another question now.
We do have one, yeah, so I just noticed that. Thanks, Suzanne. So question around levelling up fund and future funding. So really that really speaks to what I've mentioned around the focus for LEPs moving forward. So the Community Renewal Fund, the Levelling Up Fund, both funds that are out there at the moment, both funds where LEPs have an input, but they're not the stewards of the funding, so they run through local authorities. What's going to happen in the future with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and anything else, we're not 100% clear yet. We don't necessarily expect that we will, despite the fact that we've got the structures in place to handle it quite easily. We don't necessarily expect that we'll see capital funding come through us, which means that the government will have to be very clear on, what our focus is outside of that. Some of those activities I've already mentioned, some of those business convening activities, supporting the free port, pushing agendas around net zero. They're all things that we've got ideas as to what we want to do in lieu of having some of those funding streams, but a lot of it is going to be dependent upon the outcome of the process that's currently undergoing with government. But they've been very clear that LEPs are really important as voices of business. So when we know exactly how they want us to operate at a national level, then I think we could, as I've spent the last 59 minutes talking about, I think we can absolutely say that we've got, the experience, the delivery, the credibility and reputation in place to be able to make a really damn good fist of it. So, I expect that we'll be able to rise to that challenge, and albeit we might have a different focus, we will, I'm sure we'll deliver really strongly. And of course, there are some funding streams that we we will still have responsibility for, and the last vestiges of the Local Growth Fund, the Growing Places Fund, and what we do with the Getting Building Fund and everything else that we've had our fingerprints on before. They've not yet disappeared, and we'll continue to see how we can inspire really further investment in the patch, and that's all that matters. At the end of the day, everything that I've said really relates to the importance of there being a strong economy across the whole of the LEP area, and whatever the tools are to be able to deliver that, we're right behind them. So that's probably all from me. I hope that I've answered those two questions sufficiently well. I hope you found the presentation interesting. I need to go and have a cup of tea. Hope enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate your time. And if you want us to do something similar for any groups in your local area, drop us a line to hello@southeastlep.com and we'll respond accordingly. So have a good morning, everybody. See you soon. Thanks very much.